So ladies and gentlemen, scholars, good morning. We are set to begin our ceremony with the raising of the colors. Before we begin, we ask that you stand quietly in place. So go ahead and stand. Please remove any hats and silence any electronic devices. As the colors are being raised, please place your hand over your heart and continue to do so for the Pledge of Allegiance and National Anthem that will immediately follow the raising of the colors. At this time, we will have the raising of the colors by American Legion Post 169, Color Guard led by Post Commander Robert Bartholomew. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So to everyone gathered here this morning, you're truly welcome. We're here to celebrate the completion of the Jefferson building, a multi-purpose building housing a gym, theater stage, classrooms. You'll hear more about the building from other speakers, but I wanted to say that it's named the Jefferson building because John Adams Academy names its buildings after influential members of our American heritage. The Jefferson building, named in honor of Thomas Jefferson, joins the existing buildings named after John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, and George Washington. At this time, we'd like to bring the inspirational portion of the program. So we're going to begin with remarks, and I'd like to bring up our Executive Director, Mr. Joseph Benson, to start our remarks for us this evening. Morning.
Thank you, Norman. Thank you all who have come together today to celebrate this monumental event in the Academy here at Roseville. Thank you for all those people who made it possible for us to have this experience. Today on Constitution Day, my remarks today will be about dedication and consecration as we consecrate this new building, the Thomas Jefferson Building. 77 years after our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, our beloved President, Abraham Lincoln, in his legendary Gettysburg Address, declared that the Civil War was a great test of whether our nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated could long endure. Now, through nearly 75 years since that monumental address, our great nation has endured. It has endured the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, and the Gulf War. Our constitutional republic has been a beacon to the world, Since 1776, freedom in democratic republics has been on the rise. FreedomHouse.org estimates about 60 of the 159 countries in our world are now free, with 48 countries partly free. In the last 50 years, where freedom has been legalized, we have seen a great decrease in poverty, especially amongst the deeply poor. These great strides were all started at the conception of our great nation with a constitution that was formed to protect our freedom. But all is not well. Both FreedomHouse.org and the Cato Institute estimate on aggregate in the past 8 to 10 years, freedom in the world has been in decline. In this country, we have seen headlines such as, "School removes the Pledge of Allegiance from its daily routine," or "Only 18% of our nation's high school students are proficient in U.S. history," or "A Board of Education removed Thomas Jefferson from his textbooks," or "A state no longer requiring history be taught before 1877. Without a common understanding of our shared legacy, how can this great nation, how can our great Constitution endure? It can only endure with the rededication of our collective selves. Although Abraham Lincoln was called upon to dedicate and consecrate the battlefield at Gettysburg, where so many men gave their lives that our nation might live, he instead said, "In a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or to detract. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. We stand here today to consecrate the Thomas Jefferson Building, the crowning addition to this first campus of the John Adams Academies, an academy established in dedication to that great unfinished work spoken of by Abraham Lincoln. In fact, the mission and vision of the academy is restoring America's heritage by developing servant leaders who are keepers and defenders of the principles of freedom for which our founding fathers pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. I believe in our generation, the great test of whether our nation can so endure is not so much found on the battlefield. Rather, the unfinished work of preserving our liberty is found in the classroom. In the words of Ronald Reagan, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free. That unfinished work spoken of by Abraham Lincoln will never be finished. The only way to maintain our heritage is to restore it again and again in the hearts of each new generation. So today, on Constitution Day, as we dedicate this new Thomas Jefferson building, let us again dedicate ourselves to the great task remaining before us, that we here highly resolve that our forebears, who gave so much to preserve the freedom enshrined in our founding documents, did not so give in vain, that with our academy, we give a new birth of freedom in the hearts of our children, so that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Thank you.
I'd now like to invite up Mr. Gabriel Heydrich, our Director of Facilities, to give some brief remarks.
Good morning, everybody. I get the pleasure to comment about liberty in connection with architecture or place. This is something that is often taken for granted. Architecture has an influence in our free society, and it applies to what we're doing here today with our brand new building. Like I mentioned, we often take architecture and place for granted. Place is a term I affectionately use for our built and natural environments. Place intentionally and unintentionally influences mental states, emotions, which in turn influences behavior. This is something I get really excited about, kind of geek out about it, and I actually wrote my master's thesis on this, on the influence of architecture or place on American communities and government. I hope that we'll look at this place, this building, as more than just a school or a building. I've prepared some brief remarks that will invite you to consider and understand the influence and value of place, not only on an individual or a classroom level, but even as a community and as a society. In turn, I hope it will give this building more value. So what is architecture's role? For the answer, and in a classical John Adams Academy fashion, I turn to history, principle, and great minds. Winston Churchill said, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us." This is so succinct and so true, I don't think we recognize it. Architecture is, among many things, social movement. The influence of architecture in American politics and can influence morals as well. We'll take a look at brutalist architecture. In the 1960s, it was a time of detouring from the expanse of principles of liberty and a free society to the very narrow lanes of self-interest, national embarrassment, and government overreach. In part, as a result, an architectural form gained momentum in America. This is brutalist architecture, in my opinion, appropriately named. So what is brutalist architecture? Since I don't have a presentation slide before us today, let me attempt to paint an image in your mind of what brutalist architecture is. Many of us are familiar with the bunkers, the big concrete bunkers of World War II on the beaches of Normandy and others. Only brutalist architecture is hundreds of times bigger. They are very much fortress-like. The word is derived from the word concrete, and you can guess that this architecture's dominating construction material is concrete. Brutalistic architecture is monolithic pieces of concrete of crushing proportions. It is not easy on the eye, and in fact, I would call it ugly. This style flourished mainly among government and educational institutions during the 60s, just preceding the 60s and just after. This architecture is not uncommon to be found perched well above the visitor's head with dark spaces underneath and no clear access or entrance to the building. It's not uncommon to have hundreds of windows lined way up high above the people's heads looking down on the people, but the people have no way of looking in and observing their government at work. Architecture is combined with, this particular architecture was also combined with socially progressive intentions. One example is, believe it or not, in the city of Boston. The Boston City Hall is like an inverted triangle where it houses the public workers and the elected officials. At the very top are the public workers, the public employees. You think that your elected officials would be at the top, but it's the public employees. The floor below them are the elected officials. Further with that building, it's hard to find where the entrance is, and underneath, at the pedestrian level in the street, it's very dark and very uninviting. The problem with brutalistic architecture as public buildings is this: they are generally dark, unforgiving, downright ugly. It does not encourage or invite public discourse, and it makes government feel, and in some cases, makes it inaccessible. It is psychologically and literally elevates the government above the heads of the people. It fosters the sentiment that government has eyes on the people without providing a method for people to have eyes on the government. In short, it obliterates public discourse and a government by, for, and of the people. As the American form of government became more administrative and less representative, the brutalist form of architecture became the standard. It was intentional because a government that is more administrative and dictatorial naturally does not want to interface with its people. In short, brutalist architecture is entirely inadequate and inappropriate as an architectural style of a free society. But it does indicate, however, the direction we're headed in. I had an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. a few years ago as an elected official. And at that same time, during that same week of my visit, I had to turn in my thesis for my master's. And as I told you, my thesis was about architecture and the relationship with the free society and the government. I happened to have a divine opportunity where I met with some high-level officials of the National Park Service who are in charge of the National Mall. They pointed out all the brutalist architecture that surrounds the National Mall, right in the heart of the democracy of our great nation. She mentioned how this architectural style was inappropriate for our form of government, and the government is finally looking at eliminating brutalist architecture in the heart of democratic government. I couldn't be any more happy. So at this point, you may be wondering, this is great, Mr. Heydrich, or maybe not. But what is the connection with our multi-purpose building? What's the connection with the Jefferson building? For one, in these brief remarks, I hope I have enlightened you on the value, influence, and connection and role of place and architecture in our society, be it political or educational. Second, this building has been crafted to meet functional and aesthetic demands, unlike realistic architecture, to meet its purpose. The purpose of this building, I would say, is to elevate all shifts in our communal harbor through quality and principled education, entertainment, and athleticism. With this, I'd like to give my personal gratitude to the masters of the craft that shaped this building for you. My gratitude goes towards the school board, to Mr. Bill Hagman, Mr. Cody Pacino, and most definitely Mr. Al Candela. These guys are masters of their craft. With finesse and passion, they created and shaped this building for us, for our use, to be of benefit to our greater community, as we abide by the principles that we believe in and live by. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce our headmaster, Mrs. Heather Brown, who will come back and give us some final remarks. Immediately following Mrs. Brown, we'll have presentations of certificates by our elected officials.
Thank you and good morning. The first thing I want to say is how much I appreciate our scholars. You are doing an amazing job of sitting and hearing about this building, and I'm so proud of all of you. 8 years ago, when John Adams Academy opened its doors, we all had great dreams. We were so excited to welcome the scholars and the families to this campus. And this building standing behind me is beyond my wildest imagination. I never believed or knew that we could be where we are today. Yet with the hard work, the entrepreneurial spirit, the dedication of our staff, of our board, of our families, and of our hardworking scholars, this building stands behind me today. This building is not simply a building, scholars. There are walls, there are chairs and bleachers, there's basketball courts with 6 basketball hoops, there's an amazing stage, sound system, and classrooms. But this building is a lot more than that. For this building represents opportunity. Everyone who sets foot on the John Adams Academy has a unique and special opportunity to partake in something unique, to partake in something noble, and to become changed by this very place. So scholars, as you step into this building as a dedicated cheering fan of our basketball or volleyball team, as you sit as a spectator to watch our stellar music program or drama department put on a performance or show for you, or as you sit and learn and fellowship and work amongst your staff and amongst your peers, I want you to see this as an opportunity. We are so excited as the staff and board of directors and parents of this academy to offer this opportunity to you scholars. But it's not just for you, it's for everyone. Because what happens in this building will change you, it will shape you, it will inspire you and encourage you. And we would be squandering it if we didn't share that. Because you see, we can't restore America's heritage if we keep it to ourselves. And so I want to implore you scholars, families, and staff members today, as you walk through the doors of these buildings, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Welcome your community, invite your friends and family, and go outside of these doors and become a citizen who's going to change the course of our country by your strong will, by your determination, by your entrepreneurial spirit, and by the fact that these core values that we uphold have become part of who you are, and you'll take them and change your community, your homes, and your country. Thank you so much. Let's take this beautiful building, this opportunity, and make the most of it. We shouldn't squander it, but we should share it. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Assemblyman Kevin Kiley to make a presentation.
Good morning, scholars. It is really a privilege to be with you today to celebrate a new milestone for one of the finest academic institutions I have ever seen. In the years since John Adams Academy opened, it is clear from its tremendous growth that it has tapped into a profound desire on the part of families in our area for a distinctive type of education, one rooted in foundational American principles, which we just heard enunciated by scholars on this stage in the form of the John Adams core values. I have the highest level of admiration for Dr. Foreman and his vision, for the outstanding school leaders that make John Adams Academy run day in and day out, for the amazing teachers who are doing the most important work that anyone in our community could do, and of course for you, the wonderful, wonderful scholars of John Adams Academy. This is a school that has already had a major impact on our area, and we can only begin to imagine the impact it's going to have in the future as more scholars graduate and begin their adult lives with the John Adams core values as their anchor. And I know the Jefferson building here is going to be an important part of that future, enriching the education for John Adams Academy scholars, an important part of the community that's been built here. So I do have a certificate from the State Assembly. Has anyone seen President John Adams around by chance? There we go. Dr. Foreman, on behalf of the California State Assembly, it's my honor today to present you with this certificate.
Now hear from Mr. Bryant Malesi, representative to Congressman Tom McClintock, representing California's 4th District.
Well, congrats everyone, and on behalf of Congressman Tom McClintock's office, I would like to present this certificate of special congressional recognition presented to the John Adams Academy, Roseville campus, in recognition of opening of the Performing Arts and Athletic Center, signed by Congressman Tom McClintock, September 17th, 2018. I'll present this to John Adams.
And next we'll hear from Mrs. Christine Rydell, Senior Representative to State Senator Jim Nielsen.
Good morning, scholars. This is a really happy day for you, for the parents, and for the staff here at the John Adams Academy. Senator Nielsen sends his best wishes along with this simple wish, that in the years to come, you scholars will enjoy playing and performing in this new state-of-the-art building, the Jefferson building. Congratulations. And I have, on behalf of Senator Nielsen and the State Senate, a Senate certificate as well for John Adams.
And I'm going to invite Mr. John Adams, President Adams, to come back up to the podium here. Many of you may recognize Mr. Adams as one of our founders. He and Linda Foreman, Dr. Dean Foreman, founded this school, and he's our president and chairman of our board of trustees, and he's going to give us some remarks as well to close us out.
Good morning. You know you have
been so good today. You sat there the whole time. Many of you have been standing. Thank you. I hope that you remember this day. It was mentioned, Mrs. Foreman. Now with every John Adams, there was an Abigail Adams. And make no mistake about it, this family has an Abigail Adams. If you want to know who has great vision, poise, and integrity, it's Mrs. Foreman. She is an individual of great vision. This academy would not have happened without her. In fact, she helped me put my hair on today. And she's spraying it down. She says, now you know what it takes to make a good hairdo. Well, okay. I think I'll stay with my other hairdo after this, though, if that's okay. You know, I was thinking about it today. Do you know what sets John Adams Academy apart? It's the golden rule. Now, some of you may be thinking, oh, that's the rule where he who has the gold makes the rules. Where it's not. In fact, this academy would not have been done without those that are committed to excellence. The golden rule is to treat others as we want to be treated. And that's where many of you and your parents rally to the cause. And charter schools are built on an idea. And the idea is freedom. America was built on an idea. It's called freedom. Charter schools, as you heard earlier, legalize freedom in a way. Isn't that kind of a misnomer? Freedom exists. It exists naturally. It doesn't have to be legalized. It exists in the hearts and the minds of each of us that we have the desire to become who we were meant to be. 8 years has changed the educational landscape of Roseville, El Dorado Hills, and Lincoln. This building, named after Thomas Jefferson, is something where many of you may be saying, well, why him? Why did you choose him? Well, years ago, I read the 20 volumes of his writings. He's a unique founder due to his knowledge and wisdom on freedom, equality, and education. I am reminded of what John F. Kennedy said at an event honoring Nobel Prize winners in 1962, quote, I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge that has ever been gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. Thomas Jefferson is a gentleman of 32 who could calculate an eclipse, survey an estate, tie an artery, plan an edifice, try a cause, break a horse, and even dance a minuet. Whatever qualities he lacked in helping to build America were well represented by his colleagues of Washington, Adams, Franklin, and Madison. We honor and revere these individuals and have built this academy in their honor to educate a new generation of such caliber of men and women. They represent some of our mentors and heroes and appreciation of our national heritage. It's fascinating to me to note what Jefferson had written on his tombstone. Quote, here was buried Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia. Independence has been won, and freedom is now spreading. The Declaration of Independence laid down the principle of equality and freedom and education of citizens to maintain a self-governing free republic. He expressed it this way, by swearing an eternal hostility toward every form of tyranny over the mind of man. After American independence was won, Jefferson continued to turn his attention to equality and education when he wrote to his mentor George Wythe, quote, preach a crusade against ignorance, establish and improve the law for educating the common people. Jefferson's vision was a natural aristocracy built on intellectual excellence, public and private virtue, and not a European version built on birth or wealth. This general education would enable every man to judge for himself what will secure or endanger his freedom. As he wrote his statute for religious freedom, he enjoined, quote, "Almighty God hath created the mind free, and to try to control or coerce another's mind is a departure from the intent of the holy author." We teach our scholars thus in Socratic fashion. As Jefferson said, truth is great and will prevail if left to herself, that she is the proper and sufficient antagonist to error, and has nothing to fear from the conflict, unless, by human interposition disarmed of her natural weapons, free argument and debate, error ceasing to be dangerous when it is permitted to freely contradict them. I hope I have given you a small glimpse as to why I honor and revere this man and his colleagues. We have not assembled Nobel Prize winners here today, but educational heroes that understand the idea of educational freedom. The K-12 assembly that we have here today is a representation of the greatest hope for preserving freedom, which is the education of our children and the next generation. It's you. You're the ones that will preserve this freedom, this idea that has germinated when Thomas Jefferson wrote that Declaration of Independence. I humbly acknowledge the hand of Providence in this endeavor. I express gratitude this day to all of you for your contribution in this accomplishment. This new edifice will bless the lives of our scholars and expand their education and natural liberties that we have the honor to promulgate and enjoy. In closing, may God continue to bless John Adams Academy, and may God bless America. Thank you.
What a wonderful segue to our next speaker. Speaking of divine providence, we're now going to have a benediction from our chaplain, Mr. Woody Woodson.
Greetings. Please bow your heads and pray in your tradition as I pray in mine. Empowering God of grace and mercy, we invite your presence into this place today. Our community has come together today to celebrate the abundance mentality that has led to this special moment. Through much labor and prayer, we are now able to step into a new era of restoring America's heritage by developing servant leaders. Today, we ask for your blessing upon this place, these scholars, and all those who will gather here in the years to come. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Now the final moment that you've all come for, the ribbon cutting. On the count of 3, I'm going to count, and then we're going to say cut it. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Cut that ribbon!